A very good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all of you. Myself, Swati Nagar, and I'm working at National Center for Polar and Ocean Research, and I'm a National Committee Coordinator of APICS. So, welcome to all to the SCAR Capacity Building session. This session will represent the details about the 2020 SCAR Fellowships and Visiting SCAR schemes. So the first part of the session took place yesterday and chaired by Dr. M. Ravichandran. He is a Vice President of Capacity Building, Education and Training SCAR and moderated by Alice. So this session is self-contained with the recording of testimonies and feedbacks of SCAR fellows and scholars. Along with this, today we have three presenters with us. Dr. Griffin, he is an Executive Officer of SCAR. Dr. Betsy Wilkins, she's representing Polar Educator International, and Dr. Lavinia, she's a marine biochemist from the University of Liverpool. So besides that, we have Dr. Gabriela Roldan, she's from the University of Canterbury and helping us as a moderator. So during the session, there will be an opportunity to hear the testimony and feedbacks from the fellows and scholars and the details of other resources like Polar Educator International. So at the end of the session, we'll take live questions as well as yesterday's unanswered questions, if any. So you can send us queries or questions in the live question and answer box.
Very good morning, very good afternoon, and good evening to all. I am Ravichandran, Director of National Center for Polar and Ocean Research, India, and Vice President of SCAR to look after capacity building, education, and training activities. Thank you all for joining and welcome to SCAR Capacity Building Workshop. Capacity building focuses on promoting an organization's ability to do new things and improve what we currently do. It is the process of developing an organizational strength and sustainability in a rapidly changing environment. Training, support, and development of Antarctic community are fundamental to SCAR. SCAR promotes and facilitates the incorporation of Antarctic research into the educational landscape. Involvement of early career researchers in international collaborations provide invaluable experience and training for individuals aspiring to become future polar researchers and leader in polar science. SCAR's capacity building activities are coordinated by SCAR Capacity Building, Education and Training, in short, CBET committee. On this occasion, I sincerely thank SCAR ExCom and CBET Advisory Committee for their continuous guidance and feedback. SCAR is committed to helping researchers in all of its member countries and beyond to participate in understanding scientifically the physical, biological, chemical, and geological processes at work in Antarctica, and also humanities and social sciences. Use that knowledge and understanding to predict the change that are happening in Antarctica and also elsewhere in the world. And also finally, provide objective and independent advice to policymakers, especially the Antarctic Treaty System. To achieve these goals requires that efforts be made to raise national scientific capacities in polar research, especially in developing countries. Towards this, SCAR offers some of the opportunities such as early career fellowship, aim to facilitate collaboration and knowledge transfer, visiting scholarship to build capacity in countries with the smaller or less developed Antarctic research programs, SCAR medals to recognize Antarctic research, international cooperation, and education and communication, apart from SCAR's President's Medal. And also working with the partners for education. And finally, diversity and inclusion. In this workshop, we will present details of 2020 SCAR Fellowship and Visiting Scholar Scheme, including eligibility, applications, and the adjustment made to reflect the impact of COVID-19 pandemic. There will be opportunity to ask questions live along with the testimony from fellows and scholars and details of other resources available for advice. Also discuss how SCAR can address issues of diversity and inclusion and the work that SCAR capacity building, education and training committee undertake in partnership with other organizations. We need your feedback to improve various activities, especially how we can do better to promote all CBET activities. I remind once again the audience to ask questions in the live question answer box. If anyone asks the question to a particular person, please do mention the address to whom that question. With this, I invite Dr. Johan Griffin to present fellowship program. He is an executive officer in SCAR Secretariat and he is instrumental in CBET activities of SCAR. Johan, please.
Hello, everyone. My name is Owen Griffin, and I'm the Executive Officer at SCAR. And I'd like to talk today about the opportunities available from SCAR for early career researchers through our fellowship scheme, which was launched earlier this year. The scheme aims to provide early career researchers with an opportunity to make a short visit of several weeks or months from their home institutes to a facility in another country. The idea is to foster international capacity and cooperation through the experience of the fellows. We have some eligibility criteria to apply to the fellowship scheme. You must be a current PhD student or within 5 years of having received your PhD. These 5 years cover full-time professional research. So if you've had time off from maternity or paternity leave or other reasons, then you can contact us to let us know when you apply. Importantly, you can apply from any country, but your host institute must be a SCAR member country, which is also different from your home country and your current workplace. The proposal must contribute to the objectives of at least one of our science groups, and the SCAR website is full of information about those, broken down by discipline, and we cover the full range of research from humanities to cosmology and everything in between. How do you find out about the schemes and how to apply? And keep in mind that our deadline in 2020 is at the end of August. The SCAR website is your first destination. It provides an overview of the scheme, including the nature of the awards, broadly the eligibility, and from here you can access information about our fellows past and present, how to apply to the scheme, mentoring materials, and some frequently asked questions. One very useful document to access and download is the application pack, which pulls together lots of the most important guidance and information about the scheme. This is available as a document to download from this session on the portal, and it should hopefully answer many of your questions about the scheme. We hope to make at least 3 to 4 fellowship awards this year, depending on the available funding. The application pack importantly includes details of the required structure of any application, with the main proposal accompanied by selected keywords, allowing us to match an application to relevant reviewers, and the agreement of your home and host institutes. And of course, a budget, which can be up to $15,000 US. It also includes details on the evaluation criteria used when reviewing the proposals we receive. And these are used by all of the reviewers to assess each application. The research quality and relevance to SCAR are key elements, but the capacity building potential and deliverability of the proposal are also important. All of our applicants will receive feedback on their proposals from the reviewing process, and we hope this is useful for either further applications to our fellowship scheme or to the proposal in general if it forms part of other applications. Clearly, the current travel restrictions pose a major issue for the effective delivery of the fellowship scheme. While we hope that in the coming months the conditions will improve sufficiently to allow some of these restrictions to be eased, we realize that we're going to have to be flexible in dealing with the practical limitations for our fellows. SCAR is committed to working with their fellows to ensure we can be as flexible as necessary to make the schemes a success. We're already doing this with the 2019 SCAR Fellows, and we expect that as necessary, we will be extending, for instance, the time limit for completing a fellowship, which at present is 1 year from the time of the award. Completion of the proposal objectives through virtual meetings can also be considered, and we will have proactive conversations with the 2020 awardees about the practicalities once we've announced the results. As always, if in doubt, contact us at the Secretariat. For more information, I'll again point to the application guide available to download from the documents link within this section of the portal. We also provided an overview of the scheme during the 2020 APEX online conference, available to view from the APEX Vimeo channel with the details shown here. We have also provided some webinars together with APEX Council of Managers of National Antarctic Programs, offer a single fellowship and administer another one on behalf of IATO, who represents the tourism operators for Antarctica. The details and eligibility differ from those of the SCAR scheme and are indeed different between the COMNAP and IATO fellowships. But both of these schemes are actually closed for this year, but look out for details and an announcement in early 2021 for further opportunities from these partners of ours. CAMLAR also offer fellowships and scholarships, so you can check out their webpage also. If you're signed up to our social media through Facebook and Twitter, then you should be receiving news and reminders about the fellowships through the year. I'm delighted to say we also have some personal testimony from past fellows to hopefully give you a better flavour of the potential of the scheme for your career. That will follow next.
Hi, my name is Lovey. I'm a postdoctoral fellow at the University of Liverpool, and I am here to talk about the SCAR Fellowship program. So I was a SCAR Fellow in 2016-2017. So first I'd like to talk about the application process. So I personally found it quite easy, actually. It's very straightforward. The application is online. The key piece of advice would be to contact your potential supervisor and the host facility early so that you build this relationship, especially if you don't know the person and you're contacting them out of the bat. But even if you do know the person, do contact them pretty early on. The rough timings for the SCAR fellowships don't really change year to year. So that gives you flexibility in trying to figure out when to contact researchers. And, they might be busy as well. So contact them early, discuss a project. And the key things to do is to know your project. What is it you want to do? And why do you want to do it? And why this specific person at this specific lab? And how are you going to do it? Have these questions in mind as you're approaching the beginning of this application process and when you're trying to contact a potential supervisor as well. So the research proposal is available online and it's really simple. So it's about 1,000 words, if I'm not mistaken, and you provide a concise title and the objectives. For the objectives, I actually had it listed down as objective 1, 2, and 3, and so forth, so that it's very clear to the reader and to the reviewer what the objectives are of my proposal. When you're writing something as short as 1,000 words, you want to really be concise, but make sure you have everything in there. So you need to have all the information, but written succinctly, which can be quite difficult to do. So then coming back to the background and rationale, why is this project important? And why does it need to be done now and at this particular host institute? So what are the facilities that this host institute has that you don't get elsewhere? What are the expertise as well? So for example, if a professor is really the lead really in this field, and state that like this is the best person for me to learn this method from. So how does it fit within the goals of SCAR? So the SCAR website has all the information you need on the different themes and objectives and projects that SCAR's involved in. How does your particular project fit within these goals, these broader SCAR goals? And that is something that you really want to address, because at the end of the day, this is a SCAR proposal. So methodology, how are you going to do it? Again, coming back to the fact that there's a lot to fit in just 1,000 words. So how are you going to do this? You need more than just saying, I'm going to do a lab experiment, or I'm going to do a field experiment, I'm going to do a modeling experiment. Really what you want to say is what kind of lab experiment you're going to do, or field experiment, or models. But you don't have the space to go into enough details to, for example, say what chemicals you're going to use, or what default parameters you're going to use. So have enough methodology that the reader and reviewer knows what you're doing, but not too detailed that you're essentially wasting word count. So personally, I see deliverables and success factors as two that feed into each other. So you can almost be very smart in how you write these two sections. So the deliverables are, what do you expect to achieve? One of the things is new knowledge that you want to get from this, right? And a success factor from that new knowledge would be a publication. So when you and also deliverables. So when you publish that paper, then the publication of that paper becomes a success factor. So other deliverables could include, presentation at a conference, or producing a data set, producing, a new mechanistic model. It could be a whole different set of things. So what are the deliverables for your project? And your success factors are very tightly linked to that. So SCAR does give you a pretty good budget that you can work with. And $15,000 does go a long way, especially because these are short fellowships, they're not long-term fellowships. So when you contact your host supervisor, one thing to also ask is, if, for example, if you're doing a lab or a field experiment, are there any lab supplies that they have that you can use? Or, do you have to pay for stuff? And also make sure you include things like laboratory costs for, analyzing samples. You have to do, what, as an example, so when I did my SCAR fellowship in Bagnols-sur-Mer in France, I had a lot of the vials were given to me by the university, so I didn't have to pay for that, but I did pay for the equipment, to use the equipment. So they had an hourly rate. So I booked X amount of hours. So that was budgeted into my proposal. And also see if you can obtain additional financial support. And this can come from a variety of sources. For example, I had some funds that I leveraged off the Holsworth Wildlife Research Endowment, where I did purchase a lot of consumables to use to doing the field component of this question that I had. So, then the SCAR Fellowship came in to do the lab experiments that weren't planned for the Holsworth. So I got to leverage off 2 grants, essentially, to answer 2 different questions, but they were parallel. And, having an illustrative table and figure is useful, but my main, tip would be, don't just repeat exactly what's in your background or your methods or something. Have something that you're trying to pull together. Is this a summary slide? Is this raising your big questions? So that would be how I would see adding an illustrative table or figure. Again, coming back to it, it's only 1,000 words, which means you're going to have to write and then read and then reread and reread, because you really want to make sure that you are addressing all the SCAR requirements for the research proposal. but also you are getting your point across and your project across to a reader who most likely knows nothing in your field. So one way that I went about this was I got my friends to read it as well, and other SCAR fellows, and I also had my PhD advisor to read it, and also the host supervisor. So they all give you these really good feedbacks, and you can work them through to get a much better and concise proposal. Most important, I think, is to not give up, because my first SCAR application was actually not successful, but I rewrote the application and I was successful the second time. So I think it's perseverance does pay off. So how did the SCAR Fellowship help me personally? So back in 2015, 2016, I had an idea that I wanted to test, particularly how whale fecal material would influence phytoplankton growth in the Southern Ocean. So this was an idea that I had, so that was my question. And I went to sea and I did this experiment, and then I had got the SCAR Fellowship and I went to France to analyze this data, and I ended up finding something really interesting, that phytoplankton and bacteria are competing for nutrients in the Southern Ocean, and the extent of that competition is driven by different nutrients in whale fecal material, for example. So I got to learn all these new methods in microbial ecology. I'm coming from a biogeochemistry background where my only experience to date had been looking at, iron concentrations in seawater and different types of material, but not really in microbes or microbial ecology. So I got to learn all these new methods in France. And by learning these methods, I also found something really interesting. I got to network with different people. And at the end of my SCAR Fellowship, I landed a postdoc in Australia as a microbial ecologist with the Antarctic Climate and Ecosystem CSE back then. Again, I did similar experiments with sea ice this time, and I got to go down to Antarctica. And at the end of that, I had a second postdoc where now I had all this data that I collected. I ended up moving to the University of Liverpool and started a postdoc with Alessandro Tagliabue, where I learned to develop new mechanistic models. So really, it started as an idea, and the SCAR Fellowship really helped me build that idea up and test it and find something new that really just eventually, gave me 2 postdocs out of it. So more than just the science, I learned a lot about a different culture. So Bagnols-sur-Mer is right by this beautiful coastline. So when you head out of the university, the view is the ocean. Beautiful, beautiful coast. And the vineyards, if you just walk a little bit further. I also really enjoy pottery, and I made some, quite a lot actually. I made quite a lot of local friends who are not part of the university, and one of them had a pottery studio, and she taught me all these new techniques. So I learned a lot about science and networking that fed, into my current career to date. But I also learned a lot about their culture and the people, and developed other skill sets that I had, which were my hobbies. So I am forever grateful to the SCAR program and the SCAR Fellowship, because essentially, 5 years down the line, I'm still benefiting from my 3 months fellowship that I had in France. So thank you very much to listening to my talk, and I look forward to addressing any of the questions you have tomorrow. Thank you.
Hey everybody, how are you? We're waiting for Argentina. First of all, I want to thanks to Dr. Eoan Griffin and the SCAR organizer for inviting me to participate in these talks. And in advance, I want to apologize for my English. My name is Bruno Fusaro. I'm biologist from the Argentina Antarctic Institute. I am one of the winners of the 2018 SCAR scholarship that allowed me to stay in Natural Museum of Natural Science in Madrid, Spain for 6 months. I'm currently working in the Department of Ecophysiology and Ecotoxicology within the Coordination of Life Science. I'm doing my PhD study, which consists analyzing the parasitic found in Xi'an and storm petrels, skuas in the South Shetland and Hot Bay, Antarctic Peninsula. The aim is to see the relationship of the parasite with the physiological aspect of their host. So, before I tell you a little bit about my experience, I would like to thank Dr. Andres Barbosa, who proposed the application and directed me during my time in Madrid. The objective of this video is to briefly tell you how my experience with the SCAR grants was, how we planned the project, what led us to do it, and how we developed it in during the months in Madrid. Our project consists of the molecular and epidemiological diagnosis of parasite disease in Picocelis penguin in the context of global climatic change. I'm speaking in the present tense because it is still ongoing. We are waiting for the results. Before we get into that, I like to briefly tell you why parasites are important and need to be studied, particularly in Antarctica. Antarctica parasitological research is relatively recent. The first reports of parasites in Antarctica are the result of the study of a large number of host necropsies collected during the first expedition to the continent. But only in the last few decades, the parasites have become the object of the study by different research groups. And there has been a change in the way we view parasites. This has to do with the fact that practically all species are parasites by at least one parasite during their lives. Describe the parasites community and their characteristics allow you to characterize the position of the host within the trophic web, their use of habitat, and the environmental health of the ecosystem in which they live. Okay, back to our research project. The objective were the application of molecular techniques to determine the parasite population of 3 species of Picocelis penguin. We want to detect the presence of micro and macro parasites and to determine their geographical and host distribution. So, as we say, parasites play a key role in the population dynamic of host species. Global change is one of the main factors affecting the health of the ecosystem through the relationship between the climatic variation and human movement. This results in change in the distribution, abundance, and virulence of parasites and pathogens. The Antarctic Peninsula is a region where climatic change are most evident, increasing the risk of emergence of new diseases and parasites that produce an effect of the host's immune response, which could compromise the stability of Antarctic wildlife population. In summary, we aim to increase the knowledge about the diversity of parasites and pathogens in Picocelis penguin to find out whether they suppose they are to the health of the health host and to ace what the climatic variation may cause the emergence of new diseases in this space. Regarding the molecular tools, we seek to generate genetic metadata that will be of great importance to existing repositories. Our final and global objective is that this result will be useful to develop long-term health surveillance of Antarctic ecosystem. Now, how did we do that? Before explaining how we carried out the project, I would like to say I have never worked in molecular biology, so I can say that this residency involved a very important academic training for me. Okay, development of the research covered different stages. First, a study of the literature was developed and how molecular biology could better answer our question. When this step was advanced, we carried a working protocol that involved dissecting and prospecting 17 penguins that were collected in different campaigns. This parasite was removed and samples of stomach contents and faces were taken, along with stomach and cloacal swabs. Then DNA was extracted from parasite, swabs, stomach contents, and faces using extracting kits, also the phenol chloroform technique. Later, amplification of 16As, 18As, and COX-1 gene was performed that the product was set for massive sequence, DNA metabarcoding, to develop molecular proof that will allow use to detect parasite in any location through the study of the fecal matter. Also, the swabs will allow you to observe how the microbiota is in the stomach and in the cloaca, which together with another project of Dr. Andres Barbosa will allow you to see how the relationship between the parasitic fauna and the gastrointestinal microbiota is. We are currently working with this 16A gene that obtained from the metabarcoding of the stomach and cloaca swabs, doing the corresponding biodiversity analysis in the air platform. Hopefully, the result of 18A's analysis will arrive this month. Hopefully. In terms of my personal development, the result was significant. The molecular biology laboratory of Museum of Natural Science in Madrid is very well equipped and has a wonderful technical staff who helped me a lot, to which I'm very grateful. The experience helped me a lot in academic training, from the bibliographic study of the scientific publication to handling of gene bank data, as well as learning all the necessary technique to carry out this project in the laboratory, technique of DNA extraction, the use of different primer depending of the gene of study, its later preparation of the core development of the PCR for its sequencing. I also learned how to use different bioinformatic programs for sequences analysis and phylogenetic tree development. I was also able to participate in different conferences held during my time at the Museum of Natural Science in Madrid, at the University of Murcia, to which I was invited. It's allowed me to meet many undergraduate and graduate students as researchers with whom we developed great bonds of friendship that helped the exchange for knowledge. This scholarship also helped to strengthen institutional ties between Argentina and Spain to that point that Dr. Andres Barbosa has included us in his new research project. We have included him in ours. We keep in touch, so we are doing the sequence analysis together and to do residency again in the future once the pandemic is over or share an Antarctic campaign. I can also say that the technique learner during the months of my stay will be put into practice in the development of my doctoral thesis. Personally, I was a great impact to know the scope in terms of knowledge generation that molecular stone can provide us, about the importance of working together with members from other countries and other projects. It was to recognize with a personal experience what represents the scientific cooperation at its highest level. I hope that in the future this cooperation will continue to increase with other researchers and that we will be able to generate more knowledge that allow you to better understand the Antarctic ecosystem for the development of global public politics that will help this conservation. Finally, I would like to thank again Dr. Johan Griffin for inviting me to participate in this talk, and Dr. Rosa for trusting me, to SCAR for granting me the scholarship, and to my director in Argentina, Julia Diaz and Martin Ansaldo, along with my laboratory and campaign college who have helped me the most in my training. Thanks you very much.
Thank you, Lavanya and Bruno, for your testimony and feedback. So we will have some few questions we will answer. Then the remaining questions, if at all, we can answer in the last session. In the first question, one of the question asked is, in the proposal, do we need to add some plans if we do not visit host institute due to COVID-19? So maybe Jochen, you can answer that question.
Yes, thank you very much, Ravi. Yes, clearly we're going to have to be flexible in the way that we approach proposals for this round of the fellowships. We do need to be explicit if somebody is planning to have a purely virtual meeting with their hosts and there's no travel involved, then it will be very important to be able to give full details on how they're going to be supported through the fellowship, how the contacts are going to be maintained, and what sort of communications are envisaged as part of the proposal. So it is possible to submit a proposal that doesn't have an element of moving to the lab. We're willing to accept those this year, but we do need to know in very good detail the nature of the communications and support that the fellow is going to get as a result of that particular proposal.
So we will take one more question. How many and what kind of opportunities are available for yet to be an early career research career fellow?
If you don't meet the eligibility criteria of the early career fellowships, but are still wondering what it is that SCAR can do for you as an early career researcher, then all of our groups are available to join, and many of them are very proactive in terms of encouraging early career researchers to get involved. So if you look at any of the groups on our SCAR website, they all have contact details to be able to join the group, find out about meetings, what sorts of things the groups are getting up to. And many, in fact, do provide travel funding. Of course, not such an issue right now, but for the future, early career researchers are generally prioritized in the travel planning and funding allocations from each of our groups. So that's another way that early career researchers can be involved. And of course, always look to APEX, the Association of Polar Early Career Researchers, for their opportunities too.
Thank you, Jochen. I think due to shortage of time, we will take up the remaining questions, but if anything, we will take it at the last. Now we will move on to visiting scholarship program. Logan?
The SCAR Visiting Scholar Scheme complements the fellowship scheme by providing opportunities for mid to late career researchers. It's also based around short-term visits to another SCAR member country, in this case, usually a week or two. And in recent years, we've revised the guidance and application procedure to simplify the process and expand the scope of what is possible by career stage and the nature of the project. These changes were put in place to emphasize the core purpose of the scheme in building capacity in countries with smaller or less developed Antarctic research programs, and also to emphasize the potential for this capacity building to be in either direction. So including visits from developing countries to gain experience, which will be of use once the scholar returns to their home institute. Eligibility begins 5 years after completing your PhD. So there's no barrier to relatively young researchers applying to the scheme. And as with fellowships, the host country must be a SCAR member and different from the applicant's home and current country. The simplification of the application process means the main proposal is limited to 1 page and a CV, which has led to a much wider diversity in applications in recent years. As with the fellowships, all of the details, including the online application form, are available from the SCAR website, and we have the full guidance documentation available from the documents option in this session in the portal. Important details such as the budget limit of $5,000 are available through that. The application guidance also includes details on the evaluation criteria, which emphasize demonstrating the capacity building goals through the impact of the proposal. And I'm delighted to say that we will now hear some personal testimony from one of our previous scholars, Dr. Mahesh, to show how the scheme can help build capacity.
Hello everyone. One of the most pressing concerns in today's world is the climate change. When we talk about climate change, there are three components: the past, the present, and the future. So we need to look at these three components together rather than different entities. My name is Mahesh. I'm a paleoclimatologist. So I work on and try to understand how the Earth's climate has changed in the past. After completing my PhD from National Institute of Oceanography, I joined the National Center for Polar and Ocean Research as a research scientist in 2012, and since then I have been working on the Antarctic lake sediments. So our objective mainly is to reconstruct the past climate from the two regions of Antarctica where India is active, that is the Schirmacher Oasis and the Lassaman Hills from East Antarctica. We look at the lake sediment cores, reconstruct the past climate, try to understand the evolution of the lake, the interaction with the local climate and the general Antarctic climate, as well as how the response to the ice sheets. Since the last couple of years, I had there was a roadblock. So I was wondering what is the next step. So the SCAR fellowship happened at the right time. Literally, it was a shot in the arm. My friend Anis suggested that I should apply for the SCAR, and I contacted Steve Roberts from the British Antarctic Survey. So we came up with an elaborate plan. Actually, Steve came with an elaborate plan, and it worked well. I got to visit not only one institute, but 4 institutes as part of my SCAR fellowship. So my SCAR fellowship kickstarted with me visiting British Antarctic Survey in the first week of September. Along with Dr. Steve Roberts, Professor Dominic Hodgson was my host at the BAS, and I had one of the most interesting time in BAS. There was one question that was always bugging me, because Dom, as we call Professor Dominic, he had been very active, and along with his paleolimnologist friends, they have been working in the lakes of Lassaman Hills since 1990s. So I always wondered, is there anything left? But Dom assured me that there's a lot to be done, and he gave me confidence. They were limited by the technology of their time as we are now. And Steve, he was wonderful, a very great host. He taught me a lot many things apart from the nuances of paleoclimate. I always kept statistics at a bay, but Steve taught me and showed me the wonders and how we can effectively use statistics. And after my visit at BAS was kind of the hub for me. From BAS, I went to the University of Bristol. There I went to the lab of organic geochemistry and the School of Chemistry. Dr. David Knapp and Professor Ian Bull were my host. Incidentally, their lab is one of the premier research labs in the world. I had a very good opportunity to work with them and to learn a new technique or a novel proxy that have been developing in the world of paleoclimatology, that is paleothermometer, using the branch GDGTs from sedimentary organic matter. The 2 weeks I stayed at Bristol went by a flash. It was very tedious, it was very time consuming, but I learned and got familiarized with a new technique. And from Bristol, I came back to BAS, and I stayed for a week in BAS, and then I went to Ghent University, Belgium. So I had an opportunity to work with Professor Elie Verlin and Professor Wim Weerman. Again, they have been working in the Antarctic lakes for the last couple of decades, and their experience has been very immense. So working with them, and there I learned a new technique. For me, of course, it is working on the lake sedimentary organic matter to understand the fossil pigments and their importance and how we can use it to understand the evolution of the lake. So again, I spent around 10 to 12 days in Ghent University. Within this time, Elie had a meeting with all the paleolimnologists. So the meeting was basically to have an idea to look in the future, like what is the next step we have to take. So Ellie was there, Wim, Dom and Steve had come, and Anish was one of my colleagues from India. He was also part of this meeting. And we pondered over the lake's future, because we are the major group that have been working in the East Antarctica. So we came up with plans to carry out coring campaigns in the ice-free regions of East Antarctica. It is the Schirmacher Oasis, the Ongul Islands with the Japanese team, and the Lassaman Hills. So, and we also noticed that the lake records have been incidentally very less projected in the IPCC report, that we need to fulfill this lacunae. And from there, I came back to BAS again, and I also visited Newcastle University. I met Dr. Emma Thompson. She has been again working on the GDGT technique for the last few years. And the idea is to develop a global calibration equation, which we can use it not only in Antarctica, but in other regions, probably Southern Ocean or the Himalaya or even the Arctic. So like I had an opportunity like this to visit 4 universities and to interact with different scientists and researchers. So I think this was possible basically because of SCAR, this fellowship. So this enabled me to visit these laboratories, to interact with these researchers, to exchange ideas, probably to work together and to come up with future plans. And it also needs an external push when you are in research to get ideas and to look into a research problem in a very different way. So that is what I learned from this. And my host Steve has been amazing. He has been teaching me new things and introducing me to new techniques. And after coming back to BUZZ, my end had been one of the most interesting period, because I got Steve took me to SPRI, that is the Scott Polar Research Institute. And incidentally, the SCAR office, executive office, is also in the same building. I got to meet the people behind SCAR. I got to meet Chandrika, Iogan, and Rosemary. And these are the people who actually move SCAR. And it was a wonderful, I had a wonderful time with them to know the people who manage SCAR. And the icing on the cake was I got to ring the traditional bell at 4 p.m. in SPRI. So that bell was mounted on Scott's ship, that is Terra Nova. So I got an opportunity to ring the bell, and thanks to Steve. And so I couldn't have asked for more. My takeaway message from this is to any researcher working in Antarctica. So we all have been, we are the blind people in a room trying to understand an elephant. So Antarctica is so huge. So it is very difficult for one group to try to understand the entirety of Antarctica. So we all blind people need to come together and to form groups and to try to understand what's happening in Antarctica. So as a paleoclimatologist, I would like to conclude that the past is the key to the present as well as the future. And also I take this opportunity to thank and acknowledge a lot of people. And first, I would like to thank my director, Dr. M. Ravichandran, for giving me an opportunity and supporting, and Dr. Rahul Mohan, my project leader, for supporting me in this SCAR fellowship. And of course, Steve has been amazing. He came up with this, as I said, he came up with this elaborate plan. I was always wondering whether I would be able to do this in the short time, around 4 to 5 weeks, and we did it. Thanks, Steve. And Dom for giving me confidence and for showing that there's more to be done. And Ellie and Wim for hosting me at Ghent, David Knapp and Ian Bull for hosting me at University of Bristol, and Emma for giving her time at Newcastle University, and Anish for being my partner since I started working in Antarctica. And it has been a wonderful time at SCAR, and I would say that every young researcher should take an opportunity to and go outside and gain more.
Thank you, Mahesh, for your testimony as well as feedback. So we have one question. Is there a limit on how long the visiting scholarship visit can be? Maybe Yogan, you can.
Yes, thanks. There's no actual limit to it. And in recent years, the budget, the maximum budget of $5,000 has increased from $2,500, with the idea being that we can expand the scope of what our applicants are considering in terms of their proposals. And as we saw from Mahesh, you can fit an awful lot in if you're creative about the way that you actually use the funding. So we would encourage people to put proposals in, just knowing that the overall budget is $5,000. You can propose as long as you like. And that and other details, as I mentioned in the slides, are available from the application guidance. Both the application guidance for the fellowships and for the visiting professors are available as documents on the portal attached to this session. The naming conventions aren't particularly helpful. We can't actually put the file names in there. The smaller document, the PDF one, is the one for visiting professors. The Word document is the one for, visiting scholars. The larger document is the fellowships one.
Okay. One more. What costs for the host can be covered in the budget for both the fellowship as well as visiting scholar?
So we ask that certainly for the fellowships, that basically any costs that the hosts incur in hosting the fellow can be included in the budget, as long as they're not overheads that would have been paid already, or bench fees, those sorts of things. So consumables that will be used up as part of the project, sampling costs, testing costs, those sorts of things, materials that are required, those can be included in the budgets. So for instance, if somebody is putting together a proposal where they won't actually travel to the other institute, but some testing will be done on their behalf and the results will be analyzed between the fellow and the host institute, then that can be considered as a proposal under the fellowship scheme. For the visiting scholars, we don't expect that there will be particularly extra costs for the hosts, but we will consider them. And of course, the proposal for the visiting scholars is only one page, so you do need to fit in a justification for any of the costs in there beyond the travel that we expect. And for both the fellowships and visiting scholar schemes, of course, because of the situation with COVID, we will be flexible about allowing people to wait until they're ready to make use of their fellowships for an extended period of time beyond the year that we normally allow from the date of award.
Thank you, Yogan. I think we'll take one more question. Is there any fellowship for masters or first year PhD student from university with a smaller Antarctic research program?
There's no particular program that we have that is specifically for smaller Antarctic research programs, but of course the evaluation of every fellowship is very much dependent, part of it is dependent on the capacity building nature of the proposal. So we give an extra weighting to those proposals that are clearly going to meet the capacity building ambitions of the program. And in that way, we hope that there's already a way in which the smaller programs less developed programs will actually be incentivized, if you like, and brought to the fore.
Okay. One more to add that, does the international travel route have to be available at the time I submit the application? Someone is asking whether the travel route has to be there in the application.
No, I think it's fine that people make applications on the basis of what they would expect to be, if you like, normal conditions when travel routes will be available. And we again will work with the successful fellows to work to whatever timetable we need to ensure that they can effectively undertake the project. We're doing that already with the current batch of visiting scholars and fellows. Those awarded in 2019, we of course have to allow for the situation at the moment, and we're allowing them to delay their travel so that they can undertake those meetings and visits when it's possible.
Okay, thanks, Jürgen. One more. I hope someone has just finished his or her PhD, but with the situation at the moment, they don't have a current any job or affiliation. Can still he or she can apply for the fellowship?
Yes, there's, and in fact, in the context of capacity building, if you can show that this will be crucial to getting you back on into a situation where you will have an Antarctic research career and will make a significant contribution towards that, it's certainly not an impediment. You just need to be clear about what the goals are beyond the fellowship to make sure that it's clear that this is going to be something that's useful in general for your career in a more long-term basis.
Thanks, Jürgen. So now we will move on to another one. It is SCAR medals and diversity and inclusion in SCAR.
An important SCAR activity is recognition of excellence in Antarctic and Southern Ocean research and outstanding service to the international Antarctic community, both of which are critical to advancing SCAR's vision and mission. Peer recognition is a way of rewarding and highlighting those who exemplify the best of the Antarctic community and serve as models for the next generation. SCAR created the medals to provide this recognition. The Medal for Excellence in Antarctic Research and the Medal for International Coordination were first awarded in 2006, with the Medal for Education and Communication being added for 2018. To encourage nominations and ensure an open, fair and transparent selection process, recipients of the medal are selected by committee. An additional award is the SCAR President's Medal for Outstanding Achievement. The recipient is chosen by the outgoing SCAR President, who awards it on stepping down from office. As with all of the SCAR capacity building schemes, we review the process after each round. For the medals, we recognise that we need to address diversity in nominations, and this will be implemented for the next round. The issue is part of our efforts overall to consider what can be improved with regard to diversity and inclusion across all of our activities. The context has recently been brought into focus by the global movement to recognise racism and discrimination. The International Science Council has called on its members to gather existing knowledge on discrimination in science, convene a global dialogue within and beyond the institutions of science, and agree concrete steps aimed at correcting systemic discrimination in science. The values set out in this ISC statement, promoting equitable opportunities for access to science and opposing discrimination, are at the core of SCAR's mission and activities. SCAR's leadership is supporting the process to move to identifying positive steps to address into systemic discrimination. An active conversation is already underway within the SCAR community to address these topics, with meetings and discussions both before and part of the SCAR 2020 online meetings. The Seabed Committee will use the outcomes from these events, along with further consultation, to plan the next steps. We welcome more informal feedback on experiences direct to the Secretariat, especially on SCAR communications and processes.
Thank you. Thank you, Gagan. Of course, tomorrow there will be a medal announcement, and please do join tomorrow's medal ceremony. It will be around 8:30 UTC, and also we don't just do our work independently. We don't do independently, but also with partners such as Polar Educators International. This Polar Education International, their mission is also more or less similar way. It is connecting polar education, research, and global community, their mission. So we partner with them and we do whatever education capability required for the polar community. Jochen, can you start the polar educators?
Earth's polar regions are remote, beautiful, and challenging places, and they have a profound influence on every one of us around the world. With huge amounts of ice and snow, together with massive amounts of water moving to and from the polar oceans, they contribute dramatically to the weather and climate systems of our planet, which in turn drive the health of our global environment. The polar regions affect our behavior, and we in turn affect theirs. The Earth is warming, and the Arctic and Antarctic are presently changing faster than any other regions of the Earth. Human activity is now playing a significant role in increasing Earth's surface temperature in ways that cannot be balanced out by natural processes. Change in the polar regions affects ecosystems and communities and the economies that depend on them, with local and global implications. Polar Educators International is an essential global network, working to amplify the voices of educators and researchers passionate about the polar regions and dedicated to understanding and communicating knowledge of the Arctic and the Antarctic. Working together, polar educators grow and strengthen our network, build resources and relationships, and develop polar research for a global audience. As the network grows, we communicate with wider audiences to continue to develop knowledge and appreciation of the polar regions, their connectedness to all Earth systems, and their importance to humans across latitudes and cultures. Join us.
Polar Educators International is an essential network of educators and researchers aiming to provide a deeper understanding of current polar sciences to a global audience. Today, we're introducing the Polar Resource Book Project.
Hello, my name is Louise Huffman. I serve on the current PEI Council and coordinate the Polar Resource Book Partners Group. Most of you on this call know that the 4th International Polar Year in 2007 and 2008 was a huge success both for education and science research. There were differences with the 4th Polar Year from the earlier 3. Education and outreach being embedded in the science research projects making science accessible to many audiences was one of the big differences. There was also a sense of urgency in what the scientists were learning at the polar regions and needing to communicate that to public audiences. Science directly interacting with large audiences was also a big difference in this IPY. The Polar Resource Book, often called the PRB, was created to capture the energy and enthusiasm around International Polar Year Education and Outreach. It was also a practical handbook for both researchers and educators. The Polar Resource Book Partners Group developed a scoping document. The first thing in that document was to define the need for a new PRB. Polar resource research has been identified as an urgent threat to life on Earth, and the PRB is a one-of-a-kind educational resource for communicating those changes. It's written for a dual audience, to both scientists and educators wishing to communicate those global change topics. It was published in 2010, so a revision is needed to update both the science research and best education outreach communication practices. The other thing that is a big need is that this book is now out of print, but there's still a large demand for it. The proposed project is to provide an online resource available in multiple languages that can be downloaded. It will include current polar science and future research questions, activities and labs for teaching polar science, communication techniques for different audiences. It's also a capacity building, has capacity building on polar careers, looks at the polar communities and indigenous knowledge, and it will have a built-in evaluation component that wasn't available in the first PRB.
Hello, I'm Sophie Weeks, one of the Polar Educators International Vice Presidents. PEI is very excited to be one of the 4 partners working together to produce an updated version of this valuable resource. Input is also coming from SCAR and IASC, both of whom have funded the first phases of the project, and early career scientists represented by APEX. Each partner has appointed a representative. In the case of PEI, it's me, and we meet regularly. We've each organized the project in a different way. PEI has a project steering group involved in decision making, a website working group working on tasks from the current phase of the project, and a wider working group of PEI members offering expertise when it's required. The partnership is aiming to do the following: share a free online resource version of the resource for use, organize mechanisms to collect feedback, evaluate, review, and update the resource, and seek new contributors, and publish the updated version of the PRB, building on the goal of IPY to provide accessible and diverse polar education tools. The current status of the project is what we call phases 1 and 2. At this stage, we are focused on getting the 2010 version online by autumn this year so that people can use it, and we're organising ways to collect feedback. We will work together to publicise the fact it's available, encourage the feedback, and evaluate the current content with a view to updating and adding. We're also discussing the format of the new resources. To move on to phases 3 and 4 of the project, we require funding. So data from phases 1 and 2 will be compiled, and together with the scoping document, provides a demonstration of need and value to funders. In these next phases of the project, we would do an open call for tried and tested content. A lot has happened in polar science and education in the past 10 years. We would modify and update the existing content, and we would establish methods for sustaining access, monitoring use, evaluating and updating in the future. There is information on the PEI website about the content of the 2010 version. And quickly, for those of you who don't know it, the book introduces the sciences of atmosphere, ice, ocean, land, people, and space, followed by lab, field and classroom activities based on those themes, and a section on improving science communication presentations. It concludes with a compendium of IPY education projects from around the world, and finally a special focus on Arctic science and engagement.
Hello, I'm Betsy Welkening. I'm on the PEI XCOM and I'm one of the website managers. Phase 1 and 2 data gathering starts in the download phase. This is where we understand who the audience is for this resource, the type of position that they're in, whether it be an educator, a researcher, or another type that we haven't thought of at this point. Why are they interested in this resource? How are they going to use it? Where are they from globally? And then we ask permission to contact them after they've reviewed the resource and they've started to use the resource in a follow-up questionnaire where we start to understand the value of the resource. What parts of the Polar Resource Book did they use? How did they use it, including their audience where applicable? What type of setting was it used in? And then we'll use evaluation questions to understand the need for the resource and moving forward with the next phases of the project.
So we need your support to use, feedback, review and update the Polar Resource Book. In autumn, download the book and send us feedback on what you do with it. There are also various ways to stay in touch with the project and to contact us. We hope you'll get involved.
Okay. Yeah. I hope this presentation will give audience an idea about the SCAR fellowships and the visiting scholar schemes as well. So now it's question time. So first, we have some interesting questions. So the first question is for Dr. Griffin. Can SCAR offer any help to contact the supervisor the applicant want to work with?
Hi, thanks for that question. So if it's a question of, in general, an applicant looking to make contact with a host that they haven't already identified, then yes, certainly they can contact us. We can help with some suggestions, point to the likely groups within SCAR that might be able to help them, and that sort of thing. They could also work with Apex. Apex can support people in terms of making those connections as well. If it's a case of where you've already identified who the supervisor is going to be and you're looking for SCAR to make that connection, we really expect it to be the applicants who make the initial connections. We really want this to be something that could lead to longer term collaborations between the applicant and the host. So we would expect that it would be something that the applicant did. There's no, if you like, general database of potential hosts. And in general, that's because each proposal is really very specific. We expect the host, the choice of host, plays a key role in terms of determining the effectiveness and how unique and important each of the proposals is.
Okay, thank you. Another question is for you also. Can one choose the Antarctic institutions based in the same country to host the applicant with a fellowship?
The eligibility criteria specifically exclude that possibility. Now, we have said we'll be flexible about where we can in terms of the program to reflect the current situation, and clearly in-country travel is far more practical at present compared to international travel. With that said, a standard STAR application for a fellowship, as would have happened in any other year, is possible this year. We will allow people to wait until they're ready to be able to make the travel they're suggesting, and so we will add flexibility that way. So I would say if you have a proposal that is going to involve moving or only moving within a country, please get in contact directly with the Secretariat, and we can talk with the internally and decide whether we can put that forward as a proposal to the reviewers. We'd have to be very specific to the reviewers as to why we've accepted a particular proposal of that type. So you would need to contact the Secretariat directly.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so next question is for Betsy. Is there a fee to join the Polar Educator International?
No, Polar Educators International is free. If you go out to our website at polareducator.org, you can click on Get Involved, and we have a simple application that you can put in. You can also follow us on Facebook and join the Facebook group, which is more of an informal place to chat with other members.
Thank you. And next question for Dr. Griffin. Can one Can a person from the artist background or artist can fit for the SCAR fellowship?
Yes, there's nothing to stop somebody with that background from applying for a fellowship. It's just that you need to be able to craft the proposal in a way that addresses what the fellowship scheme is for, basically, to be able to demonstrate the capacity building element of what you're proposing, and also to make sure that it does address some of the ambitions of the humanities and social sciences within SCAR. But as long as that's covered by the proposal, then there's nothing to say that couldn't be a proposal. We do, of course, try and match our reviewers to the proposal by using the keywords. But clearly we can use some discretion in terms of making sure we have reviewers in place for every proposal, that it gets fairly and well reviewed, basically.
Thank you. Okay, another question is for Betsy. One of the audience wants to ask, can I help in reviewing the Polar resource book if I'm not a teacher?
Yes, definitely. The original resource book, which hopefully will be on our website here in autumn, is geared towards both educators and researchers. And there was talking about communicating the science. There's a whole section on that. And I believe that researchers are also educators at heart, and they do a lot of work with just educating people about the work that they're doing and about the polar regions. So what we'll have is when the book gets put up online, the old version of the book, we will have a questionnaire to understand who's using it, and we will ask if you want to be contacted. And then from that, we'll contact you further about the resource, and then we will also solicit for people that want to help on the new resource.
Thank you. Okay, now this is for the Griffin. Is there going to be an extension to the fellowship submission deadline for this year?
We're certainly not planning one. Of course, we do have nearly a month to go until the deadline. We don't generally extend the deadline on the fellowships. It's been announced and in place for several months now. So if people have individual pieces of paperwork that they need to finish off, a home or host agreement, then that's perfectly fine. Just let us know, as long as we have a reasonable expectation that that's just in preparation. Then we can work with that. But otherwise, we would hope that people would be able to work to that deadline. If you're finding it a very difficult situation to do that, again, just contact the Secretariat directly, and we can work with you and see what we can do.
Yeah, thank you. Okay. Our next question is for Lavinia. So how long does it take to write the proposal for SCAR Fellowship?
Hi, I think I joined just in time then, because I literally just logged on. Well, I think it took me to develop the idea. It's probably took me a few weeks to sit down and write it. I mean, it's 1,000 words, so really writing the first one is pretty easy. But then, you know, you want to spend a little bit of time every day to just go over it to make sure, you know, you're hitting that word count and you're doing it well. I'd probably say start early. There's no harm starting early and then just working your way through the proposal. Did that answer your question? How long it took me, I can't remember specifically, sorry.
Yeah, thanks. No issues. Okay, so besides, till we get more questions from our audience or live questions, so we go to the recordings of the first session question and answer, so that there are many questions that in the last session that the audience had asked. So again, we'll come to the live question and answer. If you have any queries or questions, you can type in the live question and answer box.
Hi, everybody. I think we're having trouble playing back the Q&A from the initial session, the first session. So what I think we'll do is just say that it's possible to catch all of the Q&A from the first session through the YouTube recording of that session, which is available. I don't think we have any more questions at present that have come in through the Q&A box for this session. And thanks everybody for the questions that have come in for all of our panelists. I think unless we have anything else, I'll just hand back to Swati to close the session.
Thank you, Griffin. Yeah. Thank you, Griffin. And I hope this will be, the audience will got to know so many things about the fellowships, fellowships and the visiting scholar schemes. And thank you so much, Griffin, Gabriela, and then Betsy, Lavinia, Mahesh, and